And over the past week, the Black Lives Matter movement has found itself more powerful than ever before and richer than ever before. But as its influence does grow, what's next? Joining me now is Victor Davis Hanson, Senior Fellow at the Hoover Institution. Victor, the BLM movement, it seems to be pushing for mainstream domination through intimidation, and then along with that goes chaos. What are the historical parallels here?
Well, we've seen them throughout classical antiquity and ancient Corfu and late Republican Rome, with the 1792 French Revolution, even Mao's Cultural Revolution. As these revolutionary movements are like a stream, and then all of these other streams combine with these different agendas. A lot of them are careerist agendas. So if you want a better job at the New York Times, and you latch on to this agenda. But what happens is you get today's revolutionary becomes tomorrow's counter-revolutionary, because you can never satisfy the mob, and you have to get more and more extreme. So it started out as a legitimate worry that the police would be held to account, and then there was this motive or this idea that blacks were dying inordinately at the hands of the police or at whites, and there was no data to support it, and yet they went on to a blanket condemnation. Then where do you go? Then all of a sudden people were cutting their hair and saying, you know, I'm not black, or children were accusing their parents of racism, or suddenly it was defund the police, or you have to remove books from your bookshelf if they display an inordinate attention to white authors. And you'll never be able to satisfy this iteration as they get more radical. All we're waiting for now, Laura, is a Robespierre to come out and say, you know, I think we need to rename the months of the year or extend the week from 7 days to 10, so we don't privilege Sunday, or we start worshiping a new God, the supreme being reason. And when Barack Obama ventures forth from Martha's Vineyard to weigh in, or Michelle Obama says you can never be angry enough, or Nancy Pelosi weighs in from her palatial Napa State, we want to say, well, what are you doing right now? Why don't you go out to dinner with somebody of a different race? Why don't you put your kids in a private school? Why don't you befriend the poor? Why don't you try to do something rather than just virtue signal and relieve your psychological problems of guilt and inadequacy because you know you have privilege and you don't want to share it with people in a concrete, real way? So a lot of this is a psychological mechanism of wealthy, privileged white people especially, but also wealthy and privileged minorities, of rhetorical penance so they don't have to, in the concrete, rub shoulders with people they champion in the abstract. Well, and it's very common in history. Robespierre was an aristocrat, remember that.
Bingo. And Victor, it never affects them, because they're always going to rise to the top as everybody else gets slaughtered underneath. And there's a wonderful moment over the weekend where a Africana studies professor spoke about the need for violence at times. Watch.
Look at a historical timeline. Every single major moment in American history has pivoted around some form of force or violence. So if we're looking at the American Revolution, the Haitian Revolution, the Civil War, all of these moments involve some form of violence or some form of force to create systemic or structural change.
So, Victor, if you have to burn down the neighborhoods and tear down the Lincoln Memorial because he wasn't woke enough, then you're going to have to do it.
Yeah. I can guarantee you when they defund the police, there'll be a growth industry and private security forces, and she'll be one of the first to hire herself a guard. All
right,
right behind Nancy Pelosi and Barack Obama.
Yeah, Victor, great to see you tonight. Thanks so much.